Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm very excited because I'm sitting here with the rather marvellous, my friend, Mr. Reid Shippen. How are you?
Hey mate, how you doing?
Good, frazzled, just like yourself. I know we were just talking a little bit off camera about being stupidly busy, but also being blessed and happy to be very busy.
Yeah, busy is great. And, we have to consider ourselves fortunate, especially what the music industry went through in the last year and a half or 10 years or however long that pandemic was. I count myself fortunate. And I'm really looking forward to seeing my friends get back on the road and back in venues and getting their shit going. It's going to be a hole to climb out of, but I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, I know you're going to hate this question, but I know you've been super, super busy. I feel we talked about this, in like May of last year, where initially there was a sort of late March, April period where everything just kind of stopped. You're just finishing what you want. But then everybody sort of discovered, like, wait there, I'm sitting at home. I could make a record.
Right.
And it started getting pretty crazy busy.
It did. There was a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. A lot of it was a little interesting. There were a lot of, hey, we're going to do this stuff as a band just to put something out, but we're all going to do it on GarageBand, and then we're all just going to send it randomly to a place. And, good luck putting that together. So there was some alternative methodology. A lot of people were cutting vocals over Zoom. Artist in LA, producer in Nashville, whatever, like they're cutting vocals over Zoom. But, like anything else, any kind of disruption yields new and different results and makes people think differently about stuff. And it's, as much of a pain in the ass as it can be, it's also really exciting.
And, we sort of work in isolation so much anyway. I can't remember what artist said this, but when you're in a zone and working, if something distracts you, it takes about 20 minutes to get back to that place that you were when you were in the zone. We do tend to choose to work on our own because it gives us better results.
That's funny that you say that, because when we were shooting this last video, I was actually talking about setting up your mix flow in such a way that you don't have to interrupt creative flow to go and set up sends or set up this or set up that. Just have it there. If you don't need it, who cares? But not disrupting flow state to go do something technical is a key thing.
How are you finding sort of the workflow between the console, working in the box, coming out hybrid? Like, for instance, when you are working hybrid, are you always using the console to get to external gear? Or do you have another kind of matrix or system that allows you to get to pieces of hardware?
I'm always working hybrid, but it just depends. Sometimes stuff goes through the console, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times it's mostly just drums. I'll insert SSL channels with 1176s or LA3As on guitars or bass, or use some outboard effects or even like insert pedals and record them, So it's kind of the whatever works. I just did a huge project for the Mouse. Some of the songs were 500-600 tracks, and the deliverables is like 48 stereo stems, right? Wow. So you can't do that anywhere but in the box. So you figure out how to make that workflow work. So I've been doing that. I'm diving into Atmos. I think that's a really interesting frontier, and there's going to be a lot of conversation with pros about not just is Atmos, right, but how is it best served? What kind of medium are people listening on? How are we going to do this? Because, a lot of these labels are starting to get pushback. People are listening to their records on the new iOS update, and they're like, what the heck is this? This is not the record that we made. And so that's one challenge. And as you know, everybody likes to like really slam stuff and make it hot. But now we're moving into immersive that's becoming a standard for certain platforms. And immersive Atmos says, no, there's a spec. You can't slam this to whatever luffs is crazy. Like, you have to conform to this spec. So there's going to be a push-pull as far as formats go. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a new challenge. And I know you, like the records that you've done have always sounded bigger than two speakers. I know you've been working for a really long time on making things sound big and expansive. Well, now we can actually do that, right? Without having to cram it through two speakers. So it's a little daunting and a little exciting and, very interesting. And like I said, disruption always makes things interesting. So I like that.
While we're on the Dolby Atmos, I suppose, spatial side of it, have you been listening to spatial stuff on Apple and I suppose anything kind of jumped out that you've really enjoyed?
Just a little bit. Like everyone else, we didn't actually know we were listening in Atmos. And to be honest, I don't listen on earbuds a lot. Like I think probably a lot of people who are watching this can identify with the fact that when you listen to music for 12 hours a day, the last thing you want to do when you leave is listen to music. So a lot of the music that we listen to is, on speakers at home or here in the studio, which, by the way, as an aside, I was cooking. My wife was out of town, so my kids and I were cooking nearly every night. And we were listening to the entirety of the Queen catalog. And man, it's just unbelievable how good that stuff is. It's incredible. And we got into a great conversation about how did they let this guy get away with some of this stuff? And then I realized, it was because who's going to stop him, right? Who's going to stop Freddie Mercury? He was going to do whatever the hell he wanted regardless. And it's just brilliant. It blows my mind every time when I go back and listen. I was listening to that and Roy Thomas Baker. And I actually had a younger kid ask me, like, what are you listening to? I was like, Roy Thomas Baker. He's like, who's that? I said, just Google it. And he texted me 3 days later and he was like, holy cow. How did I not know about this? I was like, yeah, the guy's amazing. I think a vast majority of consumers are going to consume immersive audio in headphones. I think there's a lot of companies that want us to buy lots and lots of tens of thousands of dollars worth of speakers for something that might be consumed in headphones. I think there's a middle ground there somewhere. I'm interested to see where it pans out.
And so I wonder what you think about this. There's been a lot of pushback from people that are saying, well, it wasn't intended to be that way. I don't dispute that, but I'm like yourself. I'm friends with a lot of those guys that made those records, and they will immediately, when they hear that, they always go, yeah, because we didn't have a choice. Especially when they were working in 4 and 8 track and maybe even 16 track. They were compromising because they were bouncing stuff together, and it was just it. That's where it is. That's where it sits. It's on one fader. You can pan it around, but all 3 instruments are going with it when you pan it. There's a little bit of a rose-tinted spectacles, and I don't disagree. I mean, I'm happy with the way the Queen records sound, as you are too. But if Brian May wants to get in a room with a world-class mixer and wants to give me a version mixed in Atmos, I'm listening. Yeah. I want to know.
Yeah. And Brian, if you're watching this, I can recommend a couple people who would be happy to sit in there until it's absolutely brilliant.
Yourself is one of them.
You and me.
Yeah. It would be amazing.
Oh my God. Yeah, you're right. Pet Sounds is glorious in mono, right? It's also good in stereo. The Beatles catalog, we all know, and we've gone around and around in that. The Yellow Submarine remixes, the stereo remixes are great. It may be my favorite version of Eleanor Rigby. Giles's Atmos mixes of the Beatles stuff are fantastic, but he knows what he's doing and he has resources and he took the time. And one of the things that we're running into, and I'm not casting aspersions on anyone, like I understand that there's a business here, but the rush to Atmos was, okay, who's not working? Let's give them very little money and rush through all of these mixes. That's a really tough thing for people who have worked really hard to make a artistic statement, to then just be like, yeah, here you go. I spray painted your car.
It's the mid-'80s again, isn't it? With CDs. You remember in the mid-'80s, everything got remastered and we were being told as kids that the CDs were better than vinyl. And we were listening. I remember buying, I can't remember, it was like Genesis Duke, I think I bought on a CD. And I'm like, this doesn't sound better than the vinyl.
Dude, the one I had the biggest problem with is Over Your Right Shoulder.
Oh, which one? Songs in the Key of Life, yeah.
The remasters on that, they weren't bad, but the point of that stuff wasn't the ride cymbal. It wasn't the high-end stuff. It was the mid-range with Stevie's voice that was killer, right? And then you started hearing all this bright stuff and you're like, man, it's changing the way the song feels. So, who knows? And I assume Stevie gave it the thumbs up.
I don't know if he did, because I think a similar thing happened. I won't throw any of our colleagues under the bus in this one, but I know mastering engineers. They said it was just the busiest time of their life. They were just being handed tapes every single day, like multiple tapes. This has to be remastered for CD. This has to be remastered for CD. And it wasn't the way it was done. There was no communication with the mixer or the producer or the artist. So I think all I'm trying to do is draw a parallel between the initial CD releases and then the remasters that came maybe 10 years later, which were so much better and continue to be better when they go back to the original tapes. I even heard stories, Reid, that people they were taking vinyl because they couldn't get to the masters and then mastering off the vinyl for CD.
Yep.
And that happened a lot.
That still happens on some, we do archival stuff, and that still happens, that the master tapes are gone or they're degraded, right, or they got cooked in a fire or something. And also that the original masters are gone, but there's safeties and doubles and like stuff like that. And what can you do? I mean, you got to do something.
Sure.
So yeah, you're right. This is the period that we're in now. Pete next door at Infrasonic, he's mastering for digital and for vinyl, and now he masters it, and then you do what vinyl needs, as opposed to back then, everyone was doing what vinyl needed, and now they had more bandwidth. So there's an overcorrection, and then hopefully everybody will figure it out and it'll kind of center. So this is just normal.
What's interesting is actually, I've been thinking and talking about Atmos with people now for about 4-5 years. But it's just this recent last kind of year that everything has accelerated. And I remember listening to Steve Jennewick and Al Schmidt's mixes of the Beach Boys, and in Atmos, Capitol they were working in, and it was absolutely glorious because even though they only had 4 tracks to deal with, they had all these additional orchestral arrangements that had been done that suddenly were like filling around you. And then with the Beach Boys harmonies, oh my God, it was just so satisfying. I mean, in the right hands, I think is what we're both saying. In the right hands, this is an incredible opportunity to hear incredible music in a new light. And maybe not in the right hands, not so much.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing as any balance between art and commerce. And I was talking to an A&R who shall remain nameless, and he's like, well, I got to serve the creative on one hand and the corporate overlords on the other. Right? And there's always a balance there, and there always will be, and that's totally fine. I just hope that this just turns more people on to some great music, and hopefully evolves us to the point where maybe we're not just trying to cram something through 2 speakers, as hard as possible. I think it's going to be a paradigm shift in the way people listen to music and consume it. Not necessarily in your living room, but definitely in the multiverse. And it's kind of exciting.
You want to talk about anything you're working on the moment that you're excited about?
Yeah, I've always been really fortunate to work on a wide range of music, right? And that's really cool. So of late, a handful of country stuff, Dirks, Kenny, Darius, some new artists, Tennille Arts. We just finished the Mickey Guyton record. She's an amazing singer, and she's finally having her day, and she totally deserves. You know what? I hate saying deserves it. She's worked her ass off and labored in obscurity for a really long time, and now people are realizing how great she is. And so it's nice to see that hit stride. And then we switch over to, I'm doing like some hip hop vibey stuff for a guy named Jelly Roll, and some pop stuff for this guy named David J, and the new Chris Shiflett record that Jaron Johnson from Cadillac 3 is doing. We've done some stuff, and I think there's more coming up. And I did the Cadillac 3 record, and those guys are amazing. And then I think I was telling you earlier, I just got to do this massive Disney project for a park installation, and this is a thing they do. This is like, they haven't changed this thing in 20 plus years. And what's crazy about that is I didn't know, I suppose I should have assumed, but there are massive amounts of people who follow Disney as closely as people follow Manchester United, right? Like down to the granular level.
You meant to say Chelsea Football Club.
Chelsea Football Club. Just as closely as people follow Chelsea. Yeah, I was guessing. I had a 50-50, right? I had a 50-50. And one of my friends, I didn't even know, but he was like, he's totally into Disney. I was like, I could tell you things that you would freak out and they would kill me if I ever told you about this thing. He's like, I don't want to know. I want to be surprised. But it's crazy. Like, I'm mixing something that at least 350 million people a year will be listening to,
Amazing.
And that's bizarre. It's for one of the parks in Orlando. I think that's probably as much as I can say. It's not a ride. It's a big thing. But what was crazy about Disney is they went for it. Like it's from all over the world, and they literally went all over the world. And there were vocals from Africa and percussion from Israel and literally all over the planet. London Symphony
Incredible.
Orchestra at Abbey Road doing the strings and stuff like that. So it was a fascinating project. It was very detailed and very time consuming, but just a fascinating new challenge.
You're right. The quality is unbelievable. I love when you're on whatever it is, the rides or any of the experiences they have. Is the sound systems are phenomenal. They obviously really care about people's experiences. I've not had an ear-bleeding experience at a Disney park, at least not that I could.
Yeah, they work really hard to make it great. It's great.
Yeah. That must be a lot of fun. Could it be quite stressful though? How were the deliverables, the time, the amount of stuff you had to do?
The deliverables aren't that bad. It's the attention to detail, and the guy who's producing it is a dear friend and a really lovely man, which probably prevented me from killing him on several occasions. It's just a lot. I mean, when you're mixing, we had one song that had 700 tracks of vocals. That's a lot.
Right.
So, and that got bounced down, but by the time I got down to one of the songs was 560 tracks. And it's a lot to manage, especially when you get down to the level where you're like, okay, at bar 73, beat 2, let's ride the second violins up for 2 beats, stuff like that, where you're like, wow, this is a lot. But again, it's a really fun challenge. Oh, and the other thing that's really crazy about this is you can't use 2-mix compression.
Right, that makes sense.
Right? It's all stem, right? So you kind of have to balance stuff in a way that makes sense where you don't have a 2-bus compressor. However, everybody that's listening to it is comparing it to soundtracks that have been mixed for stereo and mastered, right? So you're like, I know exactly the sound you're talking about, and I can get it if you let me mix this the way they mixed that, right? So it's a challenge. It's a learning experience.
Do you find, though, that you enjoy, or a better way, let me ask this question in a different way. Do you prefer, though, having good detailed notes, though? I mean, because, if somebody's saying to you, here's the bar, turn it up here, turn it down there, pan it over here, pan it. I can work with that even if it's a lot of notes, as opposed to I don't know, Reid, I'm just not feeling it.
Right. Yeah, those are never helpful. You know what? I prefer working with people who really want to make things great. And I will sit there forever and hammer at it if someone is really interested in making it great. The whole I don't know. I don't know this, I don't know that. It's like, well, if it's your job to know, you need to know. Be descriptive.
Do you have a recollection of working with Jaclyn on this song?
Jaclyn's super awesome. I always enjoy relating to her while we're working and even outside of it. She's kind of an interesting polymath, right? Because she's a writer, and then she'll dig deep into analog synth world and do all that crazy stuff, and then she's off building some kind of crazy real estate empire. Or I don't even know what they're doing.
And an executive at Apple.
Right, and an executive at Apple. Yes. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, and I feel like every time I talk to her, I was like, what's going on? She's like, oh, well, we just moved to 30 acres in the country and we're designing this. And I was like, wow, dude, just rock on.
When I was producing the track with her, she gave really, really great notes. What she didn't like and what she loved. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I felt like it was one of those few times, because she brought in a lot of programmed material. And we had the band work around it and groove around it. And I didn't have to do too much editing. I let the things flam in a way that sounded good to me. Did you find that worked for you? Did you have to tweak anything?
I didn't notice it at all. I mean, most of the programming was harmonic, right? There was one really kind of cool Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross noise loop, right?
Yep.
But that wasn't really a beat, right? So it wasn't, here's a beat and here's drums and they're trying to work together. That was just kind of that rhythmic vibe that just dovetailed into the rest of the stuff. So yeah, I quite enjoyed the song. It was kind of fun in a big, messy, glorious rock, kind of deal. I really liked it.
When I first met her I believe it was like something like the Hotel Cafe in LA, and she was doing more of an acoustic folk set. When she and I worked on this track, and she sent me the first rough that her and her husband had done, I was like, wait there.
Who is this?
Who is this again? But it's real. I mean, it's real. Quite often people just try to do something because for the sake of it, something different. She owns this. What I love about great artists is that they're fans of music. And I know that sounds like a stupid thing to say, but they just love music. So not really tied to any one preconceived idea about how something should be. And that makes it a lot more fun for guys like you and I, because if we try something and push the envelope, they can really dig it.
Great artists lead instead of follow. That's got to be tough. It's got to be it's psychologically risky. Like it's got to be really tough to deal with your fear and your imposter syndrome while you're trying to do something completely different. You were probably at the Tech Awards in LA when Herbie Hancock was talking about Joni Mitchell. Easily one of the best speeches I think I've ever heard. I wish I had a transcript of it. I mean, it was moving and beautiful and just incredible. But I love that he was pointing out with Joni, he's like, she would do something great and everybody would love it. And they would say, okay, we want more of this. And she would say no and go a total turn to someplace else and also be great. And I can't imagine the amount of pressure that she would have had to repeat the thing that was successful. But she had the temerity to say, no, this is who I am, and just do it, which I love.
That reminds me of the Neil Young story with signing to Geffen Records. Doesn't it? David Geffen says to him, "Oh, you know that Come As You Are record? We really like that. Can you do another one of those?" So didn't he do? Was it like Trans or one of those albums where he was singing for a vocoder next? Thank you ever so much.
All right, man. Thank you. Great to see you.
Great to see you too.